The Awakening Storm. The stars belong to the Caldari. For 16 centuries, their gleaming silver vessels had swept through the galaxy like polished predators, bringing system after system under their dominion. They were beautiful, these conquerors, tall, crystalline beings with bodies that shimmered with internal light, skin like polished obsidian, and eyes that held the coldness of deep space. Their empire spanned 3 spiral arms. 47 species paid them tribute, and their technology was so advanced that many worlds simply surrendered upon first contact. Supreme Commander Dax Thorne stood on the observation deck of the KES Inevitable Dominance, his flagship that stretched nearly 5 kilometers from bow to stern. Before him, the holographic display showed the latest addition to their stellar maps, a previously unexplored sector containing a yellow star with 9 planets, the third of which showed signs of primitive technological development. "Hardly worth our attention," remarked Sub-Commander Vexkira, her voice musical yet dismissive. "The inhabitants have barely achieved interplanetary travel. Their communications are crude, and their weapon systems appear to be chemical-based projectiles." Dax Thorne's crystalline fingers manipulated the display, zooming in on the blue-green world. "Earth," he said, tasting the strange word. "They call themselves humans. How many worlds began as nothing before becoming something we regretted ignoring? The protocol suggests observation for at least another century," Vexkira countered. "Let them develop, perhaps become useful. They appear resourceful, if primitive." Dax Thorne was about to agree when an alert flashed across his consciousness through the neural interface all Caldari commanders shared with their vessels. "A probe," he said, suddenly alert. "They've sent an unmanned craft into the Laurenti sector." "That's within our border zone," Vexkira said, her internal lights shifting to a cautious amber. "Though they couldn't possibly know that." "Irrelevant. Protocol is clear. No unauthorized exploration in Caldari space." Dax Thorne's decision was immediate. "Dispatch a Harbinger. Eliminate the probe." The order went out, and within moments, a sleek patrol ship detached from the Inevitable Dominance, its drives flaring blue-white as it accelerated toward the human probe. The encounter lasted mere seconds. The patrol ship approached, scanned the primitive device that was little more than metal and silicon, and fired a single pulse that reduced it to scattered atoms. "Message sent," Dax Thorne said with satisfaction. "They'll learn respect, as all others have." What happened next would haunt Dax Thorne until his dying day. The humans didn't cower. They didn't retreat. They didn't send diplomatic envoys begging forgiveness for their transgression. Instead, a transmission arrived, broadcast on all frequencies, encoded in simple binary that even the most primitive receiver could interpret. When translated, it contained only 7 words. "You shouldn't have done that. We're coming." Vexkira laughed, a sound like crystal bells in a storm. Bold words from primitives. But Dax Thorne felt something he hadn't experienced in centuries of conquest: unease. "Monitor their communications. Full spectrum. I want to know what they're planning." 3 standard days passed without incident. Dax Thorne had nearly dismissed his concerns when the sensor officer's voice cut through the command deck's ambient hum. "Supreme Commander, multiple FTL signatures detected at the edge of the system. Caldari reinforcements." Dax Thorne asked, though he knew the answer before the words left his mouth. "No, sir. Unknown configuration. They're coming from Earth direction." The holographic display shifted, showing the approaching vessels. Dax Thorne's internal light dimmed with shock. These weren't the sleek, elegant ships of advanced civilizations, nor were they the crude, function-focused vessels of developing species. These were monstrosities. Black, angular hulls bristling with weapons. Massive engines glowing red-hot like the mouths of ancient forges. No aesthetics, no grace. Just brutal, ruthless functionality. They looked less like ships and more like mobile fortresses, designed with one purpose: to inflict maximum damage while absorbing punishment that would shatter most vessels. How many? Dax Thorne whispered. 372. Supreme Commander. More emerging by the minute. Vexcura's confidence had evaporated. This is impossible. Their technological level couldn't support such a fleet. We must have miscalculated. No, Dax Thorne said, his voice hollow. We didn't miscalculate their technology. We miscalculated their nature. He enhanced the image of the lead ship, focusing on the crude symbols painted across its hull. HMS Retribution. They're hailing us, the communications officer announced. On screen, Dax Thorne ordered. The face that appeared was not what any Caldari had expected. Humans, they had learned, were soft-skinned creatures of varied hues. This one was dark-complexioned, its face marked with scars, its eyes hard and pitiless. It wore some kind of uniform adorned with symbols that the translation matrix couldn't interpret. I am Admiral Helena Zhao of the United Earth Defense Force, the human said, its voice translated into the harmonics the Caldari could comprehend. You destroyed our research vessel. You killed 17 of our people. In doing so, you declared war on humanity. Dax Thorne stepped forward, drawing himself to his full height. I am Supreme Commander Dax Thorne of the Caldari Eternal Sovereignty. Your vessel trespassed in our territory. The response was standard protocol. If war is not your desire, withdraw immediately, and we will overlook this emotional reaction. Admiral Zhao's expression didn't change. You misunderstand, Commander. This isn't an emotional reaction. This is policy. Earth has one rule for first contact. Respond proportionally. You chose destruction. So shall you receive it. The transmission cut. They can't be serious, Vexcura said, her voice rising. We are the Caldari. We have conquered galaxies. Launch fighters, Dax Thorne ordered, ignoring her. Bring the primary weapons online. Alert the nearest battle groups. We need reinforcements immediately. Supreme Commander, they are primitives with delusions. Look at them, Dax Thorne roared, gesturing at the approaching fleet. Those are not the ships of a species that fears death. Those are the ships of a species that has embraced it as a tool. The first human vessels entered weapons range. The Caldari expected them to hold position, to establish a perimeter as most rational species would. Instead, they accelerated, burning their engines beyond safe parameters, closing the distance with reckless abandon. Fire, Dax Thorne ordered. The inevitable dominance's main cannon discharge, a beam of concentrated energy that could shear a small moon in half. It struck the lead human vessel dead center, and to the horror of every Caldari watching, the ship absorbed the impact, its hull glowing white-hot but holding. Then the humans returned fire. Not with energy weapons or gravitational disruptors, as advanced species used. They fired physical projectiles, massive tungsten rods accelerated to near-relativistic speeds, each impact delivering the kinetic energy of a small nuclear detonation. The Caldari shields, designed to disperse energy, were nearly useless against such brutish physics. The first salvo tore through 3 Caldari escort ships, turning them into expanding clouds of debris and crystalline fragments that had once been crew. Impossible, Vexcura whispered, her lights fading to a dim blue of shock. Their weapons are so primitive. Effective, Dax Thorne corrected grimly. They're primitive and effective. The battle that followed would later be called the Awakening by Caldari historians, the moment when their species awakened to the realization that technological superiority didn't guarantee victory. The human ships didn't maneuver with grace. They charged like enraged beasts. When damaged, they didn't retreat. They drove themselves deeper into the Caldari formation, maximizing damage before failing. When their weapons malfunctioned, they simply rammed Caldari vessels at maximum velocity. It wasn't warfare as the Caldari understood it. It was annihilation. 2 hours after the battle began, Dax Thorne gave the order no Caldari commander had issued in over a millennium. Retreat. Full withdrawal. All vessels, emergency FTL to the nearest defensive line. As the inevitable dominance's engines powered up for the jump, Dax Thorne watched the human fleet advancing toward Caldari space, their formation tight and purposeful. They weren't celebrating their victory. They weren't pausing to regroup. They were pursuing. They're not going to stop, he realized aloud. This isn't about the probe anymore. They're coming for everything. As his ship jumped to safety, Dax Thorne knew with terrible certainty that the Caldari Empire had made the greatest mistake in its long history. They had awakened something that didn't know how to do anything but win or die trying. And from the evidence before him, humans were very, very good at not dying. The alarm spread across the Caldari Empire with unprecedented speed. For the first time in living memory, their forces were in full retreat across an entire sector. 6 battle groups, 32 capital ships, over 200 support vessels, all falling back before the human advance. Dax Thorne stood before the Imperial Council, his internal light dimmed with shame and exhaustion. The 9 elders of the council stared down at him from their crystalline thrones, their ancient faces impassive. "Explain yourself, Supreme Commander," Elder Ixmol demanded, his voice resonating through the chamber. "How does the commander of our most powerful battle group retreat before primitives?" Dax Thorne hesitated, knowing his next words would determine not just his fate, but the fate of his civilization. "They are not what we thought," he finally said. "The humans, they're different." "Different how?" another elder asked skeptically. "Most species evolve toward cooperation and harmony as they advance. Their conflicts become more ritualized, more restrained. The humans evolve through conflict. They don't fight like we do. They don't think like we do." Dax Thorne activated a holographic display, showing footage from the battle. Human ships taking devastating hits only to continue fighting. Human pilots deliberately crashing damaged vessels into Caldari ships. Human weapons designed not for precision, but for overwhelming destruction. "They have turned warfare into an art form," he concluded, "and they have brought centuries of that art to bear against us." The council chamber fell silent. "What do you suggest?" Elder Ixmol finally asked, his tone grave. Dax Thorne straightened his posture, his internal light strengthening with resolve. "The humans won't stop until they believe justice has been served. We must negotiate." "Negotiate? With primitives?" An elder interrupted. "Unthinkable." "With respect, Elder," Dax Thorne countered, "these primitives have destroyed over 60 of our vessels in 3 days. They are now advancing toward the Solarian system. If they take it..." "Enough." Elder Ixmol raised a crystalline hand. "You will hold the Solarian line, Supreme Commander. You will deploy the Sunbreaker." Dax Thorne's light flickered with alarm. "The Sunbreaker has never been tested in actual combat. It's power cold. Is your courage failing along with your competence?" Another elder cut in sharply. "The Sunbreaker will demonstrate our true power. The humans will learn their place." As Dax Thorne left the chamber, a junior officer approached, her movements urgent. "Supreme Commander, new intelligence from human space. Their media is broadcasting continuously about the conflict." "Show me," Dax Thorne ordered. The images he saw shook him to his core. Humans around their world, rallying in vast numbers. Manufacturing centers running day and night. More ships launching. Millions volunteering for military service. An entire planet transitioning to war footing with astonishing speed. And everywhere, images of the destroyed research vessel. Names and faces of the 17 dead. Speeches from leaders vowing that humanity would not rest until justice was served. Dax Thorne had seen many species go to war, but he had never seen an entire world unite in righteous fury as Earth had done. "They're coming," he murmured. "All of them." As his ship prepared to return to the front, Dax Thorne gazed out at the stars that had belonged to the Caldari for so long. He wondered how many would still be theirs when this was over. Because for the first time in his long life, he could see the end of everything his people had built. And it was approaching at maximum velocity, wrapped in black hulls and burning hatred. Reckoning Day. The Solarian system had always been the jewel of the Caldari Empire. 5 planets orbiting a blue giant star, each world terraformed to perfection over centuries. Crystal cities floated in the atmospheres of gas giants. Orbital rings encircled rocky worlds. It was here that the Caldari had built their greatest achievements, monuments to their perceived immortality. Now it was their last line of defense. Supreme Commander Dax Thorne stood aboard the newly commissioned KES Sovereign Mandate, the inevitable dominance having been reduced to scattered atoms in the previous engagement. Around him, the remnants of the Caldari battle groups formed a defensive perimeter that would have overwhelmed any conventional enemy. 600 capital ships, thousands of fighters, and weapon platforms positioned throughout the system. At the center of their formation, the Sunbreaker waited, a technological marvel that had taken decades to construct. Not a ship, but a weapon wrapped in the shape of one. Its central cannon was capable of channeling a star's energy into a focused beam that could, in theory, destroy an entire fleet in one overwhelming strike. The humans have entered the outer reaches of the system, Sub-Commander Ithraven reported. She had replaced Vex Kira, who had not survived their retreat. Their formation is unusual. The tactical display showed the human fleet, now swollen to over 1,000 vessels. But instead of approaching in standard combat formation, they had arranged themselves in a vast hemisphere, stretching across a significant portion of the system's plane. They're not maximizing their offensive capabilities, Ithraven noted with confusion. This formation reduces their ability to concentrate fire. Dax Thorne studied the display, his unease growing. It's not about concentration of fire. It's about ensuring that no matter what happens, some of them get through. He pointed to smaller clusters within the formation. These are independent battle groups. If we neutralize one, the others continue. If we scatter them, each ship becomes its own mission. But the Sunbreaker will destroy them all regardless of formation, Ithraven argued. Perhaps. Dax Thorne wasn't convinced. These humans had countered every Caldari tactic so far. It would be foolish to assume they hadn't prepared for this as well. As if responding to his thoughts, a communication alert sounded. The human flagship is requesting parley, the communications officer announced. Dax Thorne hesitated. The Council had expressly forbidden any negotiation. But what harm could come from hearing what the humans had to say? Accept the transmission, he ordered. Admiral Helena Zhao's face appeared once more on the command deck's main screen. She looked different now, more resolute, her eyes harder, the scars on her face somehow more pronounced. Supreme Commander, she acknowledged without preamble. I offer you one chance to avoid what happens next. Dax Thorne straightened. You invade our sovereign territory and presume to offer terms. I offer reality, Zhao countered. You killed 17 of our researchers without warning. We've killed 35,000 of your personnel in response. By any measure, the debt is paid with interest. We can end this here. The command deck fell silent. 35,000. The number staggered Dax Thorne, not just in its magnitude but in its precision. The humans had been counting. They knew exactly what they had taken in retribution. Our council will never accept withdrawal, Dax Thorne said, knowing it was true even as he wished it wasn't. The Caldari do not yield. Then the Caldari will fall, Zhao said simply. Because humanity has learned one lesson through our bloody history. When someone shows you who they are, believe them. You showed us that you destroy without warning. We believe you, and we will not allow such a threat to exist. The screen went dark. They're advancing, Tactical reported. All ships accelerating toward our defensive line. Dax Thorne made his decision. Charge the Sunbreaker. Target the center of their formation. The massive weapon began to power up, drawing energy directly from Solarian's blue giant star. The ship vibrated as capacitors the size of small moons filled with unimaginable power. On the tactical display, a countdown appeared. 5 minutes until full charge. The human fleet continued its advance, now breaking into smaller groups, each taking a different vector toward the Caldari line. "They're attempting to divide our fire," Ithraven observed. "Classic flanking strategy." Dax Thorne wasn't convinced. There was something else happening, something in the way certain human ships were positioned. "Scan their lead vessels," he ordered suddenly. Full spectrum analysis. The results came back almost immediately. "Supreme Commander, the lead ships are carrying stars." "Explain," Dax Thorne demanded. "They've somehow contained stellar material in magnetic bottles. Miniature suns, each with a mass off." Dax Thorne understood in a flash of horrific clarity. Abort the Sunbreaker charge. Emergency dispersal. But it was too late. The Sunbreaker had already begun drawing energy from Solarian's star, creating a quantum link between its core and the weapon. Now, as the human ships released their contained stellar fragments into carefully calculated positions, they created a resonance pattern, a web of gravitational nodes that transformed the star-to-Sunbreaker energy flow into something else entirely. The Sunbreaker didn't just fail. It became the focus of a cascading reaction that tore through the Caldari fleet. Ships that were connected to the weapons control network overloaded instantly. Those nearby were caught in spatial distortions that twisted metal and crystal alike. In 30 seconds, half the Caldari defensive line had been neutralized without the humans firing a single conventional shot. "How?" Ithraven gasped, staring at the devastation. How could they possibly know the Sunbreaker's vulnerabilities? Dax Thorne realized the terrible truth. They studied us. All this time, through every engagement, they weren't just fighting. They were learning. Every ship we lost provided data. Every tactic we tried revealed our thinking. He looked at the advancing human fleet with new understanding. They knew we would deploy our ultimate weapon here. They prepared specifically for it. The remaining Caldari ships regrouped, forming a tighter defensive formation around the core worlds. But Dax Thorne could see it was hopeless. The humans had neutralized their greatest advantage with science. The Caldari had thought beyond them. What other surprises were waiting? He didn't have to wait long to find out. The human ships closed to conventional weapons range, but instead of the expected barrage of kinetic projectiles, they launched smaller vessels, each about the size of a shuttle. Thousands of them, moving too fast for accurate targeting. "Boarding craft," Tactical reported with disbelief. "They're attempting to board our capital ships." The Caldari had no protocol for this. Boarding actions were ancient history, rendered obsolete by automated defenses and the lethality of modern ship-to-ship weapons. No spacefaring species had attempted such tactics in millennia. Yet here were the humans, swarming toward Caldari vessels like ancient warriors storming castle walls. "All ships, repel boarders," Dax Thorne ordered, knowing how inadequate the command was. The Caldari military had not trained for close-quarters combat in generations. Their internal security teams were minimal, focused primarily on crowd control and ceremonial duties. The human boarding craft attached themselves to Caldari hulls, cutting through with thermal charges. And then the humans themselves emerged. Figures in heavy armor, wielding weapons designed specifically for ship invasion. They moved with practiced precision, securing corridors, disabling systems, and overwhelming the unprepared Caldari defenders. On the command screens, Dax Thorne watched ship after ship go silent as humans seized control. Not destroying them, taking them. The significance wasn't lost on him. The humans weren't just winning. They were capturing Caldari technology, ensuring they would understand everything about their enemy. "Supreme Commander," communications called out, voice strained. "We're receiving transmissions from the boarded vessels. The humans, they're broadcasting their actions." Dax Thorne watched in horror as helmet footage from human soldiers streamed across the tactical displays. Caldari crew, their crystalline bodies shattered by projectile weapons never designed for use in ship corridors. Humans advancing methodically, room by room, neutralizing all resistance. And most disturbing of all, human soldiers pausing to place small devices on critical systems, not destroying them, but tagging them for later study. This wasn't just warfare. This was systematic dissection. "We must withdraw to the homeworld," Dax Thorne ordered, his internal light dimming to almost nothing. "Prepare for emergency jump." "Sir," Ithraven protested, "if we abandon Solarian." "Solarian is already lost." Dax Thorne cut her off. "We must protect what remains." As the sovereign mandate prepared to jump, Admiral Zhao's voice came through on all frequencies, addressing not just the command ship, but every surviving Caldari vessel. "We recover our dead," she said, her voice cold and precise. "All 17 of them. We study our enemies, all their weaknesses. We remember every slight, every loss, every injustice. This is humanity. Remember it when you look to the stars and wonder if you are alone." The sovereign mandate jumped, leaving behind a system that had belonged to the Caldari for 1,000 years, now overrun by creatures they had dismissed as primitives mere weeks ago. The Caldari homeworld, Thailanthus, had never known war. Its crystalline spires rose from perfectly cultivated landscapes, its cities planned with mathematical precision over millennia. 16 billion Caldari lived in harmonious order, most never having seen a non-Caldari species except in educational displays. Now those billions watched the skies with growing fear as the remnants of their once invincible fleet took up defensive positions around their world. The Imperial Council had declared a state of emergency for the first time in recorded history. Ancient planetary shields, built as precautions and never activated, now hummed with power as they encased the entire world in a protective bubble. In the Grand Imperial Palace, Supreme Commander Dax Thorne faced the Council for what he knew would be the last time. "You have failed utterly," Elder Ixmol pronounced, his crystalline body vibrating with rage. "Half our fleet destroyed. The Solarian system, the jewel of our empire, in enemy hands. And these, humans, still advancing toward the homeworld. I counseled negotiation from the beginning," Dax Thorne reminded them, beyond caring about protocol or his own fate. "The humans offered us multiple opportunities to end this conflict. You rejected them all. We do not negotiate with inferiors," another elder spat. "Look around you." Dax Thorne gestured to the tactical displays showing the approaching human fleet. "Are these the actions of an inferior species? They have defeated every defense, countered every advantage, and learned our technology faster than we could adapt. They are not inferior. They are, in their own way, superior, because they understand something we have forgotten through centuries of easy conquest." "And what is that?" Elder Ixmol asked, his voice dangerous. "That the true measure of advancement isn't technology or longevity or aesthetic beauty," Dax Thorne said quietly. "It's adaptability. The humans have it. We lost it long ago." A tremor ran through the palace as the first human weapon struck the planetary shield. The elders looked up in alarm, their internal lights flickering with fear for the first time in living memory. "What do they want?" one of them whispered. "Justice," Dax Thorne answered simply. "By their standards." The shield held against the initial barrage, but tactical readings showed it weakening under sustained fire. The humans weren't using the same weapons they had employed against ships. They had adapted again, developing shield-specific armaments that created resonance patterns in the energy field, gradually destabilizing it. "We should launch our remaining fleet," an elder suggested desperately. "Attack while they're focused on the shield. Our remaining ships would be destroyed within minutes," Dax Thorne countered. "And the outcome would remain unchanged." As if sensing the conversation occurring within the palace, a transmission cut through the Caldari communications network. Admiral Zhao's face appeared on every screen across the planet. "People of Xylanthus," she began, her voice translated into perfect Caldari harmonics. "I address you directly because your leaders have repeatedly refused reality. 17 human researchers were murdered without warning by your military. We have responded with proportional force. Now we stand at your doorstep with a simple choice for you. Surrender those responsible for the order to fire on our vessel, or we will remove your civilization's ability to ever threaten another species again." The council chamber erupted in outrage. Surrender to primitives. This is extortion. We will never yield. But Dax Thorne noticed something none of the others seemed to grasp. She's not threatening extinction, he said, his voice cutting through the chaos. She's offering terms that preserve our people, if not our pride. The shield gave way with a thunderous crack that echoed across the planet. Billions of Keldari looked up to see their final protection dissolve, leaving their world exposed to the human fleet now visible in their skies like a swarm of black insects against Silanthus's silver moons. But the expected bombardment didn't come. Instead, smaller craft began descending toward the Imperial Palace, just enough to make the humans' intentions clear. They were coming for the Council specifically, not the population at large. What do we do? Elder Ixmol asked, his ancient voice trembling. For the first time in his long career, Dax Thorne saw fear in the Council's eyes. These immortal beings who had guided the Keldari for centuries were finally confronting their own mortality and finding themselves unprepared. We do the one thing the Keldari have never done, Dax Thorne said firmly. We yield. When Admiral Helena Zhao strode into the council chamber, flanked by armored human soldiers, she found the Supreme Commander standing alone before the council thrones. I ordered the destruction of your research vessel, Dax Thorne announced before she could speak. The responsibility is mine alone. It was a lie, of course. The Council had established the protocols for border violations centuries ago, but Dax Thorne had given the specific command, and more importantly, he understood what the humans truly wanted, not wholesale destruction, but accountability. Zhao studied him, her scared face unreadable. You're willing to sacrifice yourself for your people. Yes, Dax Thorne said simply. Something like respect flickered in the human's eyes. Then perhaps there's hope for your species after all. She turned to one of her officers. Establish the terms. The Keldari will surrender all military technology. Their remaining fleets will be dismantled. They will be confined to their home system for 100 years, during which time they will pay reparations to Earth. And after that? Dax Thorne asked. After that, we'll see what kind of neighbors you've become, Zhao replied. As the human soldiers began securing the palace, Dax Thorne looked out at the fleet hanging in Silanthus's sky. Not firing, not destroying, just waiting, like patient predators. Why did you come personally? He asked Zhao. You could have directed this from orbit. The Admiral's expression hardened. I was lead researcher on the vessel you destroyed. Those 17 people were under my command, my protection. I needed to see this through to the end. And is this the end you wanted? There is no end I wanted, Zhao said quietly. There is only justice served and lessons taught. Your people destroyed without thinking. Now you'll rebuild with the memory of what that carelessness cost you. As she turned to leave, Dax Thorne realized that the humans had accomplished something no species had managed in the long history of the Keldari Empire. They had forced them to change. The stars had belonged to the Keldari. Now they belonged to a complex, frightening new balance of power, one in which a species that had barely reached its neighboring planets had revealed itself to be the most formidable force in known space, not through superior technology or ancient wisdom, but through the terrible efficiency that came from evolving on a world where conflict had been the constant companion of progress. In the years that followed, as the Keldari rebuilt under human supervision, their historians would debate where exactly they had gone wrong. Some blamed their technological arrogance, others their dismissal of primitive species. But Dax Thorne, living out his days in comfortable confinement on Earth, knew the truth. The Keldari had forgotten the one law that governed the universe more surely than physics. Evolution favors not the strongest or the most beautiful, but those most responsive to change. And humans, with their brief lives and constant struggles, had become the undisputed masters of change. The galaxy would never be the same.